My name is Edward Jackson. This presentation explores relationships between the need for usable, sustainable water sources and the technological advances in ancient civilizations. The source material for all talking points in this presentation was Discovering the Global Past, A Look at the Evidence, 3rd edition by Mary E. Wisner, William Bruce Wheeler, Franklin M. Derringer, and Kenneth R. Curtis. Water is indisputably necessary for human survival. We need water to sustain human life, to bathe, to grow food, and often to transport food or goods. Without a consistent water supply, a society or civilization cannot take root and flourish. A reliable source of clean water can transform a nomadic hunter-gatherer society into a centralized and expanding civilization. Because of this need, many of the world's earliest civilizations were established in river valleys. We'll explore how the need for clean water pushed forward the technological advancement and growth of several ancient civilizations: Mesopotamia, China, and Rome. Let's first examine the civilization of Mesopotamia. People settled in this area that occupied the river valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates in the Neolithic period as early as 7000 BCE. The civilization that grew out of these settlements thrived from 3000 to 1595 BCE, mainly due to the ability to sustain agriculture thanks to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These rivers were categorized by their fast movement, the fact that they carried rich soil and water down from the highlands, and the fact that they created new farmland where the rivers emptied into the Persian Gulf. What then was the prevailing problem the people of Mesopotamia faced when dealing with these rivers that promised so much bounty? First, our text states that in Mesopotamia, land was useless unless it was irrigated. Only during the spring and flood times did water naturally come to farm fields. When irrigation was implemented, the soil deposits filled in basic irrigation ditches. Our text also states that every year, these deposits piled on the riverbanks until they grew so high that the cleaning could no longer be accomplished easily. Because of this cycle, the old irrigation ditches had to be abandoned and a new one had to be cut annually, work that was time-consuming, potentially dangerous, and that cut into productivity. To solve this problem, irrigation not only had to become more efficient, but it had to occur on a much larger scale. The solution? A new Mesopotamian innovation, basin irrigation. This technique was described in the following way. Farmers leveled large plots of land adjacent to the rivers and main canals, building up dikes around them. During the spring and other high water times of the year, farmers knocked holes in the dikes to allow water and fresh soil in. Once the sediment settled, they let the water flow back into the channel. This allowed a controlled flow of water and fertile soil to the farmers of Mesopotamia year-round. After this logistical issue was tackled, man-made waterways were constructed. Workers also built small waterways between their fields to provide water throughout the year, and farmers built terraces with water channels running beside them. This enabled farming to occur in the hillier areas through the establishment of controllable, irrigated flat plots of land. Next, we'll take a look at the Yellow River and its impact on Chinese civilization. The Yellow River had a violent current, much stronger and vastly more rapid than that of the Tigris and Euphrates. Because of the strength of the Yellow River's rapids, an exceptional amount of silt was carried down the river. Our text tells us that the amounts were up to 12 times as much as those of the Tigris and Euphrates, and 70 times as much as the Egyptian Nile. The Yellow was also prone to devastating floods and was much too violent for reliable transport of goods. These extreme silt deposits constantly raised the bed of the river. This increase has been calculated at a rising rate of 3 feet per century. Irrigation canals had to be dredged constantly, and the Chinese people had to continually build higher and higher dikes to hold back the river, or risk losing any farms or structures built in proximity to the river. A twofold solution was needed to address irrigation and flooding, and there needed to be a way to harness the river for transportation. In 7th century BCE, this marked the first attempts at building a large-scale protective waterworks in China. A series of notable canals were developed for irrigation and transport. Discovering the Global Past tells us of two major undertakings: the Hongguo system of canals connecting the Yellow River and the Ban and Sieve rivers, dating 5th or 4th century BCE, as well as the Zhengguo irrigation canal, first completed in 246 BCE. In addition to the main canals, a network of branch canals were dug from the major arteries, creating large swaths of irrigated land. Major technological innovations to facilitate the movement of water in China were the flat panel chain pump, which was in use in China at least as early as the 1st century CE. It was used to transport large amounts of water efficiently through mechanical means. Also, as early as the 2nd century CE, the Chinese used earthenware pipes to transport water to cities and buildings. Finally, we get to Rome, who had a different set of problems than either Mesopotamia or the Chinese. The Tiber River, whose banks Rome was founded on, had substantial natural rainfall in the area, which made near irrigation for agricultural purposes completely unnecessary. Unfortunately, the river was often brackish and unpleasant and even unhealthy to drink, according to our source material. That being said, Rome's biggest water issue was the need for sustainable, clean drinking water, and the fact that the terrain of the Tiber River banks was marshy and could only be used for farming after being drained. The solutions to these problems lie within the drainage ditches that redirected surplus water for the farmlands, making the soil farmable, and the great Roman aqueducts. In 312 BCE, Romans borrowed the technology of their Greek neighbors to create an extensive aqueduct system. This delivered fresh water to the cities of Rome and eventually was used throughout the Roman Empire. Through channels both covered and uncovered, this spurred innovation in infrastructure, great bridges that were up to 150 paces to carry out valleys and gorges, arch technology that reinforced these bridges and other great structures found throughout the Roman Empire, and water-resistant cement. Now, once the human race was capable of farming, we fought to tame the land, to settle and take ownership of our own small piece of the earth. The ability to do this on larger and larger scales allowed more and more to be done with the land, using less work and less personnel. Arguably, the most important aspect of the taming of the land was getting water where and when we needed it. Each innovation meant that there was now more time for those not working the land to contemplate, experiment, and implement the next innovation, allowing civilizations to grow to the extent that it has. We now have proof of the ingenuity of ancient civilizations, not only as artifact, but also still in use today, such as the Roman bridge in Segovia, Spain, that still brings water into the city, the Zhanggu irrigation canal that is still used today in China, and the irrigation techniques of the Mesopotamians that we still use today. We have taken the ability to transport water to new heights, rerouting mighty rivers like the Ganges of India, a project that is planned for the near future, or holding back unheard of amounts of water with structures like the Hoover Dam. The benefits to society have been tremendous, but we must be careful that as we tame the land and water on such grand scales, we do not do irreparable harm to each other, the creatures we share the earth with, and the earth itself. My name is Edward Jackson, and this has been my presentation on technological advances necessitated by the need for clean, sustainable water. Thank you very much.